thank you so much, Liv, for just setting everything up, being so amazing. This is my first presentation in Gather.Town, so I was incredibly excited, and you've been such an amazing host. Thank you, Dan, Heather, and all of you for allowing me to share a little bit here with you today. So, I'm Timothy Summers. I am the Executive Director of Third Horizon Initiatives at ESU. I am really, really excited to be at ASU, but really even more excited to share with you a little bit about me and my work. And a lot of my core research and work has been around hackers and more specifically how they think. So let's start off with kind of doing a little introductory stuff. And we can go to the next slide, Liv. So really, it's always good to kind of start with where you're from. I was born in Jackson, Mississippi. Not sure if any of you have ever been there. Figured I'd show it on the map just in case you'd never heard of this place. It is the capital of Mississippi. Yeah, this is music is pretty important there. Probably some of you are maybe going to see the Elvis movie, which is out now, and that has a lot to do with Mississippi. So yeah, that was home. I was born there, and let's jump to the next slide. I thought I'd share with you guys. These are not all the places that I've been, but these are places where I spent a lot of time. I feel like these places have kind of shaped and made me in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. As I was putting this map together, I was just kind of like, wow, thinking about a human being and their story, right? When I was talking with Liv about this presentation and Heather and Dan, they're like, share your story. It's like, wow, you start putting the places where you've been and lived and spent time and, these places that have sort of molded you. It gets really interesting really fast. And you start saying, man, I really picked up a lot from a lot of different spots. So this is a little bit of taste of that. But it really all starts when we're young. So let's move on to the next one. You can see this is the face of a hacker right here, getting started early on, chewing on a toothbrush. But no, really, early on, I was always incredibly curious about how things worked and wanting to understand them. Yeah, this is, I think, as one of my siblings recently told me, I'm getting old. Apparently, I'm an '80s baby, so this is, I was born in '83. So this is from that sort of era. Let's go to the next slide because you'll be able to see it wasn't just about me and on my lonesome. It's always good to have a partner in crime or partners. So this is me with my cousin who is like a sister to me, and as you can tell, hackers like to poke out their bellies. That is one of the things that hackers really enjoy doing. That was one of our favorite pastimes, as you can tell. But let's jump to the next one because this is really share with you a little bit of the start of my journey. This is literally I'd say right after I started coding, literally. So this is my photo from, so born in Mississippi, grew up in the Bronx, New York. I suspect everyone can pick out which kid I am here, but if you can't, I'm sitting down at the first row there next to the sign to the left. And really funny thing, most of these kids and I are still friends today. Pretty crazy. And actually, my teacher, Mrs. Lennon, she's we're actually Facebook friends. She just sent me a note a couple of days ago wishing my mom happy birthday. So when you hear that it takes a village, it really does. But let's go to the next one because you'll see the evolution of a hacker here. Here I am, Coder 2.0, grade 7. I really had to go digging for these photos, by the way. I was, talking with my wife about this, and I was like, if I could find a photo from that time period, it'd be really great. And managed to dig these up. Courtesy of some of the folks in these photos. Like on the previous photo, Mrs. Lennon was the one that still had the photo. So kudos to Mrs. Lennon for hanging on to that. And hanging on to the slightly embarrassing photos. And but let's go to the next slide, and I'll kind of share a little bit about kind of the things that make me me, I guess. But so who am I? I'm Timothy, obviously, but these are sort of I find it helpful to kind of use words to describe, just to give you different bits and pieces of the intersections that are me. I'm a hacker. I consider myself a designer. I profess. I love teaching. I'm a builder, writer, survivor. There's some stuff in here that you'll see around that. Innovator, light worker, tinkerer, thinker. I put former spy because I was in a meeting one time with President Crow, and he literally said to everyone, "Yeah, he's a spy." So, and what he meant by that was, I used to be in intelligence, so I guess technically I was a spy back in the day, I suppose. But I designed autonomous systems for the government back in the day, which was pretty cool work when you're in your early 20s coming out of school. It's pretty neat. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've launched a lot of businesses, and I love doing that. Love helping people launch their businesses. I consider myself a little bit of an open source entrepreneur. I am someone who, will share as much as I know, and definitely have been in the situation where I've like spent way too much time on someone else's business and had to come back to my own. Like, oh man, I just really enjoy sharing. I'm an ally, traveler, love traveling, advisor, champion of causes. I'm a gamer. You'll notice in these slides, I'm a lover of the cyberpunk aesthetic. So if there's any Gibson fans out there and, some of that other stuff, I'm really into it. I'll also, drop a really, maybe this will make me sound a little too geeky, but if any of you are into Stanislaw Lem, I was a huge Perks the Pilot fan. So yeah, I like that kind of stuff. And I consider myself a supporter, someone who's, who supports those I love and care about. And, and the LF is one of those places that I just think is absolutely amazing. So huge supporter of the LF. And just a humble, hungry human being who loves to ask what more we can do to flourish. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I wrote this up this morning for you guys, just to, how do I explain myself? So this is me in a nutshell. So I'll jump into some of the next slides because, one of my students in college once said, "Hey, why do I care? Who are you, and why in the world are you telling me stuff, and why should I pay attention to you?" I'm not very good at talking about myself, so I'm going to kind of go through these best I can, short and sweet. This is one of the things I'm really, really proud. All of these are things I'm really proud of, but one of the things I'm really proud of, I was in the media for sharing some of the ways that Facebook was using your data to predict your behavior. This was well before the Netflix documentaries. This was well before it became a popular thing to talk about. This interview was actually with Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Thank you, Sanjay, for even the time, because it was early on where this conversation was not a really popular one. I remember even at the time talking with my now wife about this, and she's like, "It's not going to stop people from using Facebook." And then a couple of years later, the Netflix documentary comes out, and then you start hearing a lot of people talking more and more about it. So this is something I was really, really proud to be a part of, actually studying cognitive psychology around how people make decisions, and fascinating stuff. Just with a couple of likes, Facebook, can pretty much know more things about you than the people you work with. With a couple hundred likes, they know more about you than your spouse. It's pretty wild stuff. If you're interested in looking at any of the cool tools that are out there to analyze your social media and tell you what the companies think about you, there's a tool called Magic Sauce. You can go to Magic Sauce. It'll take a look at some of your social. There's other tools out there as well, but that's one of the ones that comes to mind. Definitely suggest you take a look at that. An example, I remember one of my students doing it, and she said, "Professor, this analysis says that I'm like a 50-year-old male from Texas." So it's not always going to be accurate, but it's definitely really interesting to see how they profile us. Let's jump to the next one, Liv. This next one's pretty really, I hate that the situation happened, but I was really happy to be able to help. There was a healthcare organization, a nonprofit, and they were attacked with some crypto ransomware. And it was just absolutely, one of the most interesting experiences. I just happened to be in Europe doing a talk on something else and got a call from an organization. Fascinatingly enough, it wasn't there's a US version of this healthcare organization that I was very familiar with because I knew people who were a part of it. It's a cancer kind of organization, and this organization was their sort of European sort of branch, and they got hit with this ransomware. I remember going to their offices, and the CEO was just distraught. Staff members on the verge of tears. It was absolutely wild to just kind of see how something, there's these hackers sitting across the world, these folks sitting across the world, and they're just sending out random emails trying to take money from folks and not realizing on the other end, there's like an entire organization of people who are just absolutely torn apart about it all. And we were able to help them get their data back and, help them continue on with their, this was for they had an annual conference, and it was their bread and butter. It's how they survived every year. And the data that these guys had locked down was all of the data relative to the conference, all of the submissions, all of the member list, everything. And so it was really the difference between these guys being able to survive another year or not. So it's pretty devastating just to kind of see how some of that has shaped the way we think and have proceeded. Let's jump to the next one. This is slightly related to some of the work that I do at ASU, but on the next slide, you'll see that one of the things I never thought I'd ever have an opportunity to do, but maybe, man, it's time's flying. I guess this was maybe about 6-7 years ago. I had an opportunity to work with some folks and try to design a city that actually was built on a blockchain, in the sense that they wanted to put all of the city's data, sort of administrative data, on a blockchain, really down to the level where they wanted like the citizens to be able to vote on the flowers that they would put in the town square, like in the city capitol. It was pretty interesting just to see these different sort of really advanced ways that some of the leaders in Europe and Asia were thinking about blockchain even 7 years ago. Let's go to the next one. On the next slide, this is actually some you'll see later. I really enjoy working with students. This was actually work done with my students and I. We were sort of approached by a national newspaper, and they said, "Hey, we've got all this data and we have no idea how to analyze it all, and we don't really know what it means." And at the time, I was at the University of Maryland, College Park. I was their director of innovation and entrepreneurship and community engagement. And it's a College of Information Studies, which is an iSchool. And so iSchools sit at the intersection of technology, society, and data. Just seeing and sitting at that intersection really allowed us to spend some time with data scientists, utilizing really advanced big data architecture to analyze millions and millions of documents. And this was just so much fun to go through and just see what we could find. The students even came up with some new techniques for analyzing the data. And we were invited to share the data with the FBI. According to them, we had found things that they didn't even know about. So it was really, really cool. And still just incredibly proud of this work with my students. On the next one, I've done a lot of writing and contribution to media and publications. This is one that I really just thought was so awesome. This is a financial magazine. It's actually one of the oldest futures and trading magazines in the country. And they were really, really curious at the time about cyber attacks on market exchanges. And myself and a couple of other hackers got together and contributed to this article. The really interesting thing about this is I'm not named in this article. I actually only one or two of us were actually named by name. We were actually anonymous, and they kind of gave us all little like color monikers, like these like nicknames to represent our personalities. Pretty interesting. And but it got a lot of attention because I think there were some things that we were pointing out that the exchanges just hadn't been quite aware of. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to do this, sitting in the middle of Chicago, talking with some hackers and journalists. What are you going to do? A lot of fun. And on the next slide, this is a really important piece. I think along the way, regardless of whatever it is and who you are, it's important to understand how to learn from your falls and how to get back up. This was an article that was done about during my career, I actually had an experience where I had become paralyzed in my left leg. And it was a really, really, really trying time of my life. I mean, I still struggle with the injury a bit. But there's, like my friends say, hey, look, you're also getting older. So, there's probably a lot of other things going on too. But this was, I was in my 20s, at the time. And man, talk about, being in your 20s and like experiencing paralysis in your body anywhere. It was wild, and not being able to walk. Yeah, that was incredibly intense. But it's about knowing how to get up after that stuff happens. I mean, all of us have challenges, right? Let's go to the next one, because the challenges lead us to amazing other breakthroughs, like meeting other amazing hackers along the way. These are just a sampling of some of the really, really just wonderful people that I've had the opportunity to work with still to this day. Some of them are still some of my closest friends. And some of them are just some of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life. There's in the photo up at the top there, you can see it's from my PhD graduation. And by the way, any of you who are familiar with Jess Evans, Jess and I graduated from the same school of our PhDs. She was actually I believe a class behind me. So she's also got one of those funky looking robes too. But in that photo there, the gentleman all the way to the right, really, really interesting guy. He and his wife, they help North Korean folks defect from North Korea. His research was on the population with the largest incidence of suicide in the world. It turns out that it's North Korean defectors who've defected to South Korea. Talk about some really fascinating and impactful research. He's been all over the world, sharing some of this really fascinating psychological research that he's done. And some of these other folks, there's, really, really cool people like Dr. Erdal Oskaya, who is just one of the most brilliant folks I've ever met in cybersecurity, and just a lot of other really cool people along the way. I think that's pretty important to share the awesome folks along the way. Let's go to the next one, because blockchain and Web3 are things that I'm really, 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 really excited about. Can talk to you about this stuff all the time. Again, another place where I wrote on this stuff. But in this particular place, I was really talking about hacking the blockchain, because cybersecurity is my bread and butter, something I really paid close attention to. And hey, look, nothing is unhackable. So let's move on to the next one. So all of these experiences kind of led me to a place where it was really about learning how to stay ahead, to understand the things that are coming, to understand the emergent and cutting edge technologies that are on the horizon, and then helping others understand it and making it as accessible as possible. And that's really what I've sort of made a career doing. Let's go to the next one. And this next one's one I'm really excited about. Look, a kid being born in Mississippi, man, I never thought I was gonna make it to the White House, and to be able to take my mama, come on, man, I was really excited about that. So yeah, I had to show a little love to the Obama White House there. I was incredibly happy to be there, and couldn't have been happier than being with my mama. So let's go to the next one. Um, so this one I had to put up there obligatory because when I first came to ASU, someone came to me in the office and they said, I was up early last night and I'm pretty sure I saw you on a commercial. So yes, I've been on a LifeLock commercial. Actually, the first time I ever came to Phoenix, I did this work with Symantec and LifeLock. So I don't know if they still run this commercial or not, but yes, you might see me on late night TV or something. Let's move on to the next one. So
we're having a good time laughing here.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
we're gonna find that commercial. Don't you worry.
Yeah, definitely. You can laugh at my expense on that one. And hey, look, I'm really, really proud of the work that my team and I are doing at ASU. ASU, frankly, I got to say, it's probably one of the only places in the world where we can do some of the stuff that we do. But at ASU, I'm building a Web3 tech for learners to own their learning records. We had a student tell us that it felt like owning the masters to their music. So that's pretty powerful, and I feel pretty excited to share that stuff with you guys. Actually, this app, really quickly before moving to the next slide, this app is actually inspired by my mama, because early on, we'd had some really interesting experiences, and one of the experiences that my mom had that really stuck with me for a long time. I was going to include the picture of the article in here, but I didn't want to be too much of a Debbie Downer. But I do have the article if any of you are interested, and I could definitely share it with you. But my mom, after so she's from a small town in Mississippi, Columbia, Mississippi. And anyone who has lived life knows that there's lots of different challenges out there, and one of the ones that I'll say one challenge I remember my mom, or at least hearing from my grandfather that my mom went through, was my mom from a really early age wanted to be a doctor, right? So a little black girl walking around talking about she wants to be a doctor, and people would always say to her, "You mean you want to be a nurse, right?" Because women weren't really doctors, and there surely weren't a lot of black women that were doctors. And kind of the cloth that I've been cut from, my grandfather used to always say, "No, my baby says she wants to be a doctor. That's what she's going to be." So I kind of always had that kind of that kind of cut. And then and then when my mom came back to her hometown after med school, and she went and trained at George Washington University and in DC. She had gone to medical school at Meharry Medical College, and she went back to her hometown, and probably like some of us, want to go back to her hometown and do some good stuff. She opened up a clinic, and shortly thereafter, the sheriff arrested her because they said she was impersonating a doctor. There was no way she could possibly be a doctor, and they actually put her in jail. So the NAACP had to send lawyers and all kinds of activists and stuff to the jail to go bail my mom out. So there's sort of this experience that I remember going through, and getting to college. I went to a small historically black college in North Carolina, Elizabeth City State. And at historically black colleges, there's usually orientation, and there's usually a statistic that is presented to you. And it's this orientation that, one of you is probably, if you look to the right of you, there's two of you, one of you is not going to graduate, because the statistic is like 50% of you aren't going to graduate or something. And, and so my friends and I are all sitting there, and we're all like, no, we're going to graduate. My mom worked 2 jobs. My dad's a truck driver, all these kinds of things. And when we graduated, all of us did, fortunately, they gave us a little wallet version of our degree. It was laminated, a little wallet version of it. And I remember thinking, man, if anyone ever asked if I went to college, like I could just pull this thing out of my pocket and I'm like, yeah, I went to college. Get off me, back up, And it was kind of this just interesting experience for us. We all felt, kind of empowered by this little thing that, at the time seemed meaningless. And fast forward to being here, and there was a young engineer who was here at ASU. His name's David Holtz, and David and I were geeking out one day, and said, "Dude, we need to be able to put this in your pocket, your credentials in your pocket, and take them with you." And here we are. I share that about David. Is David's gone now, but man, he and I, geeked out on this stuff a lot, and since then, it's been a whole effort and a whole team, a lot of great work. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of that story. Let's jump to the next slide, because this is really where I think the magic happens, and the reason a lot of us are even at university. I absolutely enjoy working with students. So, and actually, a portion of these students and I even started a lab together called the Innovation Works Lab. You can go to innovationworkslab.com and find out about some of that stuff. So you're probably interested in hackers and how they think. So let's jump into that because that stuff's pretty important to me. Again, love the cyberpunk aesthetic. We can move on to the next slide because I've got a question for you. So curious, does anyone know who this person is? If you do or feel comfortable sharing, please do. I guess there is a wrong answer, but there's no wrong answer. Anyone?
Pop it in the chat if you know, and if you don't, Timothy will give us 5 seconds to feel shame, and then he'll give us the answer.
Absolutely. All right. I don't see anything in the chat so far. So I don't even see any funny ones either. Like maybe, okay, there we go. Bezos, that's a good one. Now that's a really good one. So this is not Jeff Bezos. It could be though. You never know. Could be. But no, this is Kevin Mitnick. Does anyone know who Kevin Mitnick is? Kevin Mitnick is considered the world's most famous hacker. This dude basically, was on the run from the FBI for like years. And it's so funny because when they were, if any of you have ever seen the movie Hackers, there's a line in it and it says, snoop on them as they snoop onto us. And Kevin Mitnick was the reason that that line even existed, because the way he kept away from the FBI so long was they were spying on him, but they didn't realize he was spying on them at the same time. So he always knew where they were getting ready, when they were getting ready to raid him. So he ended up going to jail, long time. And the guy now is actually a consultant. He's a security consultant. You probably have heard of phishing. He actually has a company where they do phishing, experiments with your company to help you, protect your company from that. I think it's called Know Before. So that's who this guy is. Let's jump to the next slide, because it's not so much about who he is, it's all what he said. So Kevin said what he found to be personally true is that it's easier to manipulate people rather than technology. And I've got to say, he's absolutely right. I've never found it incredibly valuable to try to hack through the heavily fortified front door. Most hackers will self-admittedly say, hey, look, I'm lazy. I want to find the easiest way in, the lowest hanging fruit. And that's quite true. Which is why social engineering is the most successful form of hacking. Another term for people hacking. Let's go to the next slide, Olivia. This is, there's a lot of thoughts on the topic of hacking. A lot of people have a lot of things to say, but I'm going to be real with you. There really weren't many people out there who'd actually done any real research on hackers in terms of, who they are, where they come from, how they think, what do they do? How do they even refer to themselves as hackers, and what does that even mean to them? It really, up to this point, had really just been about cybersecurity. If you mentioned hacking, people always say, oh, cybersecurity, that's what you're talking about. Yes and no. Hacking is not a technical skill as much as a mindset. There are technical skills that contribute to hacking. And so, my work in the cognitive psychology of hackers, we'll go to the next slide, really kind of shifted that thinking. I wrote a body of work called Hackers and How They Think, a mixed method study of mental models and cognitive patterns of high tech wizards. Um, if you're curious about what mixed methods are, yeah, mixed methods are pretty hard to do, is basically what that means. I was telling a friend of mine that I did my mixed methods for my PhD, and he was like, "Oh, you like torture, don't you?" Um, but basically, it means that I did travel the world talking to hackers, meeting them. I've gone as far as I remember meeting someone in a bar, and this dude was sitting with a bag of cash at his feet, and I was like, "What's that all about?" And he was like, "That was my latest bounty." And I remember thinking, "Okay, I'm doing the wrong thing. I need to switch this up here." And all the way to meeting people, just tangentially on the streets of Berlin. I mean, there's and you'll see some photos here in a bit on that, but what was really fascinating about all of this work was that it really enabled me to get into the minds of some of the world's best hackers. And I don't mean some of the world's best hackers by my definition. I mean some of the world's best hackers by the world's definition. And that was really, really powerful and something I'm really excited about. It would be absolutely remiss if I didn't give out a shout out to Kalle Luutinen, who was my mentor and professor. I don't know if any of you have ever worked with Finns, but Kalle is from Finland, and one of the most amazing things about working with him was that no matter how much statistical analysis I did, no matter how done I thought, or no matter how confident I was in being good at anything, he always said, "This is fine." So great work, and I loved it. So let's jump to the next slide, because I think here I can actually start to share with you. Oh yeah, this is a photo I took when I was driving through Europe. I was on my way to go meet a hacker who was supposed to be in Bratislava, but yeah, anyway. Yeah, when I first set out on this research, people thought I was crazy because the question was like, wait, you're going to actually go meet hackers and you think they're going to talk to you? And I was like, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't they? I mean, I've been part of the community for a long time. We go to a lot of the same, same events and hang out with a lot of the same people. Sure, why not? And yeah, so this is just a artifact of that journey. Let's jump to the next one, Liv. And this will actually give you some actual quotes from some of my research. It was really fascinating to meet some of the folks that are involved in the hacking community and who are, like I said, considered some of the best in the world. This particular person, when I spoke with them, they were going through a really tough time. And the first thing they started saying was like, look, it's become a burden. Like my knowledge has become a burden. When I realized that I could hurt people and I can turn water off and people will die, like, yeah, that's pretty scary. I don't know if I want that much power. Really, really fascinating to even, think about a human thinking that way and processing even their knowledge that way. I mean, this is a self-taught person, someone who, just grew up in the age of tech and learned on their own. And then when they became an adult, it turned out that the knowledge that they had was knowledge that could change the lives of people they don't even know. This another participant shared with me that when they were asked by a leading airline manufacturer to do some security analysis on their software and on the avionics software, and they said, dude, when I realized I could change the weights and measures software and make the plane think it weighs less than it does, and it's like super easy for me to change that shouldn't be possible. He's like, Timothy, that shouldn't be possible. So these are some of the kind of things that, revealed themselves through these stories. Let's go to the next one, Liv. There were other pieces to the work, and I've developed a model, and I'll share some of the things, some of the things that have come out of this research with you, artifacts at the end. But there were a lot of different pieces of how hackers think about the things they're working on, and this one was particularly interesting. This hacker said, look, I take something on, something new, something I haven't done before, and I work on it. I want to work on it till I understand it, until I'm happy with it. This idea that that I'm not going to leave it alone until I get to a place with it where I understand it enough. Um, there was a lot of elements of the state of flow. If any of you are familiar with that work, there just was this sense of being relentless about interacting with a system. I mean, this idea of until I'm happy with it actually even says a lot about the interaction and even the way that this person was thinking about it. Let's go to the next one, Liv. So this was this was a really great. Oh my gosh, this hacker was awesome to spend time with. And they said, look, I think people wildly underestimate the creativity of the bad guy. To do what I'm doing, your creativity and your skill is going to have to outmatch all of those other people. I have a lot of technical curiosity. I like to break things down into random technical pieces, but I don't do them maliciously or for attack and defense. I do it because I'm interested in how things work, why they work, and making them work better. You pick up other hints of that in making them work better. There's again that sort of idea of commanding and controlling the technology, commanding and controlling, leveraging code, leveraging knowledge of protocols. Right, it starts there. But hacking is about a lot more than ports and protocols. You can be a creative and be a hacker. There's no your tools. And actually, if you're curious about this, I would suggest that you read a book by Graham called Hackers and Painters. Brilliant book. And Graham is one of the leading thinkers in the tech space. He actually started the Y Combinator, if you've ever heard of that. But that book really breaks down this concept of how creators can be hackers. Really, if technology and code is our medium, it's just another way of thinking about it. Let's go to the next one, Liv, because I think this one is really interesting. So this is a really fascinating headline here because it explains many of the problems with cybersecurity in this world. I mean, literally, Equifax gets hit, and the CEO says there was one person who had a bad scanner, and that was the whole reason we got hacked. Anyone who's anyone knows that you don't get hacked because of one human being. There's usually a lot of other things that have happened. There's usually a lot of other configurations that probably didn't occur, probably other conversations that should have happened that didn't happen. This was just a really fascinating chance to see some of my work actually get applied in real time. Let's jump down to the next slide, because shortly after this came out, my partners and I actually introduced sort of a new paradigm for even thinking about cybersecurity, and we called it normal chaos. And then what we mean by that is that the idea that you had everything under control in the first place was really just an oasis, because there's so many things happening in the environment that to stay abreast of it all is actually quite impossible. But what you can do is perform just-in-time thinking and do loads of forward thinking, just-in-time learning and loads of forward thinking. And those two things are actually really challenging for organizations to do. Just-in-time learning, something that some of us at ASU are quite adept at. I think if there's one of the things that you probably have seen from some of your really amazing colleagues at ASU, whoever those folks are that you really admire their work, you probably noticed that in this environment, they have to be ready to go, ready to execute, ready to innovate, ready to figure out what the next stage is. I guess that's a part of being one of the most innovative universities, right? But so in this case, what it did for us though was we were calling for a complete overhaul of the regulatory system, in terms of how we even considered cybersecurity. I was, right outside of DC and thought it was incredibly fascinating that none of our policy makers at the time were even, had any cybersecurity experience, and we were dealing with some of these massive breaches. So really, really fascinating stuff. Let's jump to the next one. So when I did my research on how hackers think, there were a few companies that were really, really, really excited. some of which were really excited and included me, and some that were really excited and did not include me. But Google got really excited about the work, and this still comes up a lot. A lot of companies, looked at my research as really being a way that they can find the best hackers. How do we find some of the best thinkers? I did a project years ago, and I remember folks asking me about coding, and at the time, a decent chunk of my team were coders who had Asperger's, and there really it really is a mindset, and it's about how a person is able to really leverage the tools at their disposal. Facebook is an example. Well, excuse me, Meta. I can't speak for Meta now because maybe their philosophy has slightly changed. But Facebook started with something called the hacker way. In fact, a lot of people don't realize, but Facebook is on one hacker way. Let's go to the next slide because we'll kind of break down for you what the hacker way is. A lot of folks don't realize this, but when Zuck took Facebook public, he wrote a letter to all of the shareholders saying that this was their approach. Facebook's approach to everything was the hacker way. And he described it as an approach to building that involves continuous improvement and iteration. Hackers try to build the best services over the long term by quickly releasing and learning from smaller iterations, rather than trying to get everything right all at once. To support this, we built a testing framework that at any given time can try out thousands of versions of Facebook. We have the words "done is better than perfect" painted on our walls to remind ourselves to always keep shipping. There's a hacker mantra that you'll hear a lot around Facebook officers: code wins arguments. So this was, their interpretation of the hacker way, right? And their sort of perspective of code wins arguments. If any of you have ever seen that movie, The Social Network, you've probably seen some of those really crazy and wild, sort of coding scenes that they had. Not every place sort of leverages the hacker way quite that way, but the most important things, really, let's jump to the next slide, really, that I'd like for you to take away about hackers from the traditional mindset. Just a few things here. You'll find that hackers and even hacker organizations, I've spent time studying underground groups, military related groups, groups that are cyber activists. I know folks who are anons. I know folks who are part of in fact, if any of you remember the Ashley Madison hack, I decided not to, but I almost put a screenshot of some of the data from the Ashley Madison hack. If any of you remember that, it was a service that folks use for infidelity, and there was an anon who I knew and reached out, and we had known each other actually from another experience where at the time they were sharing information about people, underground groups doing pedophilia and all kinds of other stuff. And I just happened to get this data chucked over the fence, like, hey, maybe you're interested in this. And it was the Ashley Madison data dump. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. And looking through the data, you see like heads of states emails in there and stuff. It was really, 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 really crazy. But I remember calling a journalist and they said, hey, I just got this data. I'm not sharing it, but I don't know, I don't know if you want to talk to the people who are involved and maybe figure out what's going on here. And he said, yeah, I got to call my editor. I'll call you right back. And he jumped off the phone. He called me back like literally a second later. And he's like, by the way, I've used that service. So if you find me in there, and I was like, I'm not looking for you. It has nothing to do with me. I'm not interested. But I tell you, it's really fascinating, just the way that the sort of these organizations work. I've been able to look at a lot of different groups and organizations. And what's really fascinating is there's rarely a top-down structure, like ever. In fact, it almost seems counterproductive in their environments. There's usually a lot more of a bottom-up, flat, meritocratic. You hear that in that sense of sort of code meets, code wins arguments sort of perspective. But sometimes it's not code wins arguments. Sometimes it's a better design wins arguments. Sometimes it's a better user experience wins arguments. So it really depends on what your goals are. Hackers love many small experiments, iterative. You'll even hear some folks talk about the Kaizen approach, continuous improvement, creating new ideas. A lot of times you'll hear folks talking about in a lot of these hacking groups, and even whether they be ethical hackers, whether they be you know folks who consider themselves black hats, or if they're just innovators. This idea of constantly innovating, constantly changing, constantly pushing the boundaries. One of the quotes that I'll never forget was a hacker said to me, "Hey, look, we get to the edge, to the precipice, and we say, what's on the other side of that?" And I thought that was incredibly powerful. Very idea centric as opposed to rule centric, in the sense of thinking about it. But hackers love to create rules. They love to create protocols and sort of guardrails within which to work in. There's an ongoing debate of whether or not hackers like ambiguity. My stance is that hackers actually have a low tolerance of ambiguity, and hence the desire to want to create guardrails. But it really depends on the hackers that you talk to, because like any human beings, hackers come in all shapes and sizes. But usually a lot more fast and agile, burning urgency, wanting to get it iterated now. Let's get an iteration out. Let's get something going. Scrappy, willing to look past the need of large amounts of resources, but saying, hey, look, we've got $5. Let's figure out how that works today. And we'll figure out how to get 10 tomorrow. And then maybe we'll figure out how to do the next thing from there. We've seen some people, try to take that approach with really, really, really important systems. If any of you followed the Theranos case, one of the arguments that people had is that, hey, look, Elizabeth Holmes and her team thought they were going to just be scrappy and iterate on this thing. And you can't really do that for things like, screening for cancer. So there are some elements of understanding the right tool for the right job. And then lastly, embracing normal chaos in this sense of not necessarily avoiding risk and not necessarily welcoming risk, but recognizing that the risk is there in the first place. One of the things that cybersecurity hackers can offer to anyone is the term assume breach. Because if you assume breach, then you never thought you were not breached. You always thought you were being potentially breached. And so you're constantly utilizing a Kaizen mindset to continuously improve on those conditions that you have. So some of the sort of really, really, really simple, quick, there's a lot of theory and practice behind each of these things, but trying to give you a little quick and dirty. Let's jump to the next diagram, because it gives you a little sense of really the hacker's mindset and traditional thinking in terms of how it all might work together. Really, the hacker's mindset is about embracing uncertainties as opportunities, recognizing that autonomy. In fact, autonomy is really important for many hackers. And autonomy doesn't necessarily mean not collaborating. Just means being able to have agency and decision-making agency specific to the work that you're doing. It's really important. The idea of faster innovations. How do we go from 0 to 100? Like, let's not sit here and just talk about it. What do we actually do to make the first steps happen? Really sort of recognizing that teams really need to be able to innovate and discover and make mistakes on their own. One of the things that we found from many hacking groups, regardless of whether they were in a company or not, was that there were little pockets of those groups that needed to be able to go off and make decisions and execute on code for the broader team. And that the team just needed to understand that, hey, these are the experts in that stuff. So their design, when they come back, like, we'll build upon that, but we're going to start with what they've got. There's a lot of that sort of continuously developing competencies and solutions, but also just the recognition of raw talent. I think there's just this real recognition of raw talent and people having sort of talented cognitive principles around some of the things that they work on. Most really amazing and some of the best hackers love to surround themselves by other really sharp hackers who may be sharp in the areas that they're in, but also in areas that they're not. It's really common to actually have someone who might be, hey, look, this is someone who just does back end stuff, but this person over here, they do front end stuff. And sometimes you'll find that hackers in those two groups, a lot of times, they actually will appreciate the innovation that each other are doing in those areas, but they're not interested in doing the specifics of that innovation themselves. But they do like to admire it and say, "Hey, you're really awesome at that. That code's great, but I'm doing this. This is my thing." And so there is this aspect of recognizing neurodiversity that exists within hacker communities, and that's an important part of the hacker's mindset as well. I know I've talked your ear off for a little while here. I want to open it up for questions. Any questions that you have about anything here? Actually, any questions that you have about any of it? And let's put because we can put my contact info up in case you guys have any thoughts, curiosities, or any of that stuff too. And you can find me online. So thank you again for allowing me to share with you.
Y'all, thank you so much. Please give it up for Dr. Summers by pressing Z or F or saying thank you in the chat. This was a phenomenal presentation, and low-key, when we talked yesterday, I did not expect this thorough of a slide deck. So these are beautiful, beautiful images, and I love the amount of information that you put on this. I'm very grateful that this is being recorded. We have some questions coming in the chat if you haven't seen them. So Hakeem has asked, did you ever have any moments of doubt, and then how did you overcome them?
Oh, wow. Yeah, great question. I think that anyone who tells you that they never had moments of doubt is not being authentic with themselves. It's of course, I remember once, sharing, hey, I'm an ethical hacker, and there was someone in the audience who just could not understand what that meant. I mean, to them, the concept of a hacker meant someone sitting in their mom's basement, like eating Cheetos all day, lazy, not, not really doing anything productive. And I remember, just talking with some of my friends in the field and also, getting their perspectives. But one of the things that, for me, I think, it's been important to remember, and I hate to, actually, I don't hate to do this, but I'm a hip hop head, so but there was a quote from the Notorious. No, it wasn't from Notorious B.I.G. It was from Jay-Z, who said, "No one's built like you. You design yourself." And I think that one of the things that you have to spend time doing is, really spending time defining what your principles are, your passions. Like for me, I know I'm passionate about education and healthcare. I'm passionate about access. I know I'm passionate about helping people. I know I'm passionate about responsible innovation. And I think, for me, it was sitting down, Hakeem, and really just like pulling together the things that are important to me. Doing good and prospering, I think, are things that are important. Being able to share with your community. And I think that as long as you ground yourself in the sort of principles of true north, I think that you can always ensure that your heart's on the right path. I hope that helps. Thanks for that question, by the way. And please feel free to ask any questions about anything you heard me talk about in the presentation. I remember when I first came to ASU, there was a presentation I did, and someone shared, that I'd had an opportunity to work with some really, really interesting and famous hackers out there, or that I got to work in designing stuff that they see in video games. So that stuff's pretty cool too, I guess. But even if you have questions about family or even how to get started, I'm happy to answer those too. And if you don't have more questions now, that's okay as well. You can always email me. You can tag me on social too. Oh, got a cool question from Heather. What advice would you give to someone who might be interested in this path, and what would you recommend? So I would say that if so, first and foremost, the definition of a hacker is open. Don't feel obligated to have to go and learn how to code. Because to be completely frank, we have higher ed and education in general. We haven't mastered how to teach people how to code yet. We still do this thing where we teach you this one way that's kind of worked for a very homogenous community, and then we sort of figure you better get it too. And what ends up happening is a lot of students end up saying, "Hey, I didn't get that, and I guess it's not for me." And I want to just share that that's not what being a hacker is all about. It really is about having a mindset where you're able to actually I'll quote a hacker, and I thought it was really powerful. And they said, for me, there's no such thing as failure. Everything's just a revision. And I think that's a really, really important aspect of the hacker's mindset as well. So the first step, I think, is in recognizing and thinking about, what kinds of challenges do you like to think about? What kind of challenges do you like to pull apart? That's probably one of the first things I'd say. One of the second things I'd say is start reading about hackers. Start paying attention to hackers. Find some hackers out there that you find interesting. They don't have to be coders. Start with someone in your field that you find really, really fascinating. The way they think about things is different. Um, how will you recognize that it's a hacker in your field? Usually, the hackers in your field are the ones being incredibly contrarian. They sometimes are the ones who are like, I understand that we've always done it that way, and I get that that way has worked, but why do we do it that way? Is there a better way to do it? Are there other ways we should think about doing it? Is this way still the best way for us? And those are the kinds of questions that hackers will ask in any kind of environment. So that thinking, I think, is key as well. Um, and then I would say pursue your passions. Find things that you're passionate about. Work on challenges that don't feel like work. Work on things that feel exciting. My wife makes fun of me because she says I wake up with a smile on my face because I enjoy what I do, and it's like that's because intentionally, that was one of my life hacks, intentionally working on things that I'm really passionate about. So to Heather's question, I would say find things that you're passionate about and intentionally work on them and be relentless about them until you're happy with them. So that's definitely the way I would do that.
I have a question.
Sure, Liv.
So in this entire discussion, I think the composite of a hacker that I've gotten is somebody who is not satisfied with the status quo, wants to push and turn an idea over on its head and try different things, try out of the box. So there's a lot of yes and a lot of relentless curiosity. I love that word relentless that you used earlier. And so maybe we're wading into the black hat, white hat conversation, but where is the boundary for us as creative thinkers, as technologists, as people who are advancing technology and society further? But as we run into the consequences of our developments, if we run into the negative impacts, how do we negotiate our brilliance with our impact?
That's a great question. It's actually one of the yeah, it's I think it's one of the most existential questions of our time, right? And so, the really fascinating thing, I'd say one of the first places to start is, at least for me, one of the first places I start is it's not. I learned really early on in my career that just innovating um, is not enough. Um, I'll share a personal story there. I was designing some systems. I can't, speak about the specifics, but I was designing some systems that were autonomous and, for various parts of the military. And I remember the way that the generals really sort of thought about the work we were doing, and I was reporting to four-star at the time. And the way that they really sort of thought about, what we were doing was like, we were basically just building a massive toy chest of stuff that they could figure out later on. They're going to do whatever, whatever their situation calls for. My job was to make sure that those systems could exist in hostile environments without getting hacked, or if people tried to hack them, that they would take care of themselves. So, designing autonomous systems and things like that were a really important part of my work. And, I remember just like seeing a photo of one of the systems I had designed maybe about a year later. And I mean, we knew that they were modular and they probably add all kinds of stuff on them. And I think when it really hit me, I saw a photo of one of my bots with like rockets and all kinds of stuff on it. And I was like, okay, I mean, I get it. They're going to put all this stuff on there. And then I started thinking, well, man, like, this is pretty wild. What does that really mean? And then, UAVs and all that. And I think it hit me even again when one of my cousins, who's like a brother to me, a younger brother, he took a screenshot from his video game and he's like, man, didn't you work on this thing? And it was literally one of the systems that I had designed. And I was like, man, you put the innovation out there, and after that, you really have no control over where it's going to go, who's going to use it, how it's going to be used. No idea. And it really encouraged me to think about responsible innovation. Not saying that, I felt, I didn't, feel good about the work that I had, done for our government, our country, but that just in thinking kind of similar to what I think a lot of people are thinking about with the like button now, right? Like when those folks designed the like button, they didn't realize what kind of implications that might have, 10, 20 years down the line. The original folks who made Instagram had no idea that it was going to cause, young kids, young girls to like second guess, their bodies and things like that. I mean, these are things that they just weren't aware of. And so now that we're in retrospect looking at this stuff, we're, having to say, wait a minute, let's think about what potential implications could be. Now, at the same time, we're not omnipotent. We can't think of every possible way that things are going to happen, or every possible way that humanity may shape and mold as things go. But I would say that there are two things that are incredibly, incredibly important: motivation and intent. At the end of the day, you need to ask yourself at every step, what is the motivation and what is the intent? And I think that a start for you is, as long as you can continue to ask that question and you can continue to challenge yourself and the other innovators around you to be better. Liv and I talked a little bit about this around blockchain and Web3. I am very interested in blockchain, but I am not interested in the energy consumptions of certain consensus mechanisms. And the truth of the matter is that one Bitcoin transaction, and by the way, a shout out to my student that I hosted this summer, my student, Rulan. Rulan is a White House fellow from Stillman College here visiting us at ASU. She's Palestinian. We did some research this summer on the power requirements of blockchain. So giving a little shout out to her there, because we did that research. But one Bitcoin transaction takes up enough power that it would require for 53 households. So 53 households, like 1 day's worth of power. So pretty massive, the requirements there. And Liv said, well, hey, what can you do about this stuff? And great question, because it really is about picking the right tool for the right job. Consensus mechanisms are where the power consumption happens. And to be totally frank, blockchain is the least efficient of all the distributed ledger technologies. It's not to say blockchain's bad, but proof of work based blockchains require way too much energy. If we shift to proof of stake, oh my gosh, it drops the power needs and requirements down almost 1,500%. Or excuse me, 1,500 times. It's pretty massive, just the sheer amount there. Geothermal energy. One of the aspects of my PhD research was on sustainability. I very much think that sustainable energy and renewable energy is really important as it relates to Web3. And I also think that if you look at places like ASU, we've got these massive solar plants all over the place. I've seen solar, crypto facilities, and I've seen even in Iceland. Iceland has a large number of crypto mining facilities because they have a massive amount of geothermal energy. And even a few years ago, I was working with some researchers at MIT on they'd come up with some technology to take old oil wells and retrofit them for geothermal. We thought that was pretty cutting edge at the time. So yeah, that's how I would respond to that question, Olivia. I think responsible innovation is important. Intent and motivation also are incredibly important.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank Heather as well for sharing a question from John. I think it's a brilliant question. So for you, Timothy, as an ethical hacker, is there a code of conduct that is common amongst those in this circle?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say that there is a okay, so there is an official code of conduct, theoretically, and it's called the Talon Manual. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the Talon Manual. The Talon Manual is actually it's actually a regulatory book that explains how the limitations of how we should and should not cyber attack each other as countries, which is really interesting. And so I would say that on the regulatory side of things, that's probably about the closest thing you're going to find to a sort of code of conduct. But culturally, there's definitely a code of conduct. Really, whenever you hear someone say that they're an ethical hacker, that really stems from the sociological categorizations of hackers, which actually, stems from the old westerns. So in old westerns, the good guy would ride into town, a white horse, white hat, and the bad guy riding into town, black horse, black hat. And so in the hacking community, there's this sense of white hats, which are good hackers. They usually are the ones who are protecting your data or protecting your systems, or they're conducting penetration testing on your behalf to try to test your systems. Their job is to try to think like the bad guys to protect you. And then you've got the black hats, which are considered the bad guys. Maybe they're part of a criminal organization. I talked to some hackers one time that hacked a Swiss bank, and I said, "Hey, why'd you guys hack this bank?" And they said it was an idiot tax. These guys, their security was so crappy, and it only took us, a couple hours to hack in. So we figured, why not? So there is that sense, and then there's what we call gray hats, and gray hats are kind of considered to be maybe mercenaries, sort of people who kind of live in the middle. There's some other hats that sociologists have come up with as well, but I would say the biggest differentiator between ethical hackers and the bad guys is really around, again, motivation and intent. We find that most motivation is rooted in, for hackers at least, is either for the lulz, to share it with other people and be like, "Hey, I did this. I hacked. Like, I did this righteous hack." For the money, because it's incredibly lucrative. For the street cred, be able to share, "Hey, I'm such and such, and I did this this cool hack, and now other people are gonna become my new fan club because of my hack." And then lastly, really just because maybe they're a part of an organization or hacktivism. It could be hacktivism, right? So hence me not wanting to necessarily say that that everyone is an unethical hacker, because there are some hackers out there that maybe are hacking for a cause. there's a load of hackers out there that kind of live by that. But I'd say the biggest thing is intent and motivation. And so intent is, we all have that. It's about whether or not your intentions are in the positive emotional attractors or the negative emotional attractors. So if yours are in the negative emotional attractors, 9 times out of 10, you're probably a bad guy. If you're a hacker, that's for sure. But yeah, I think there's that, and just the real general sense of unauthorized access, not hacking other people's systems, and if you do, having the permission to do so. Um, and sometimes that's really hard. I remember a company came to me, and sometimes people come to you with really, really, really sketchy stuff when they know you're a hacker. Like, I've had, someone offer me a blank check to do some crazy stuff. And I'm like, nope, you need to go to someone else for that. So there is that in and of itself is a big part of the difference between an ethical hacker and an unethical hacker. I mean, if you put cash in front of people, kind of see what it is that they'll do, that'll tell you a lot. So intent and motivation definitely are important parts of the hacker ethos.
Thank you so much. I want to invite our guests to please drop their remaining questions in the chat using the Everyone feature so that everybody can see them, particularly me, so that I can read them out loud. But while we're waiting on final questions, I have one. It's really two questions wrapped up into one, but you can answer in any way that you like. What is exciting to you right now, and who is inspiring you?
Oh, wow. Great question. So there's a lot of things right now that are really exciting to me. First thing is the technology that we're building, the digital wallet technology that we're building is really exciting. The work that's happening in the LF around extended reality and digital twins, and really the future that we might have there, I think is incredibly exciting for me. Some of you may be aware of the work that we recently did around filing, for intellectual capital for ASU in the metaverse. I think that's some really interesting stuff and opens up lots of opportunities. And I really am inspired by a lot of different people right now. I find myself being mostly inspired by folks who are willing to ask, how do we do more and better, and how do we extend our current thinking? How do we, I think that was one of the things that actually attracted me to the sort of the ASU charter and ethos. Really, this idea of of including, whom we include. That sort of perspective is incredibly different from the sort of traditional mindset. And in actuality, it even lends itself incredibly well to where the future is going. But I find the new, fresh, there's a lot of new, fresh, young thinkers that are really inspiring me. Before I came to ASU, my previous 5 years was working with people who were between the ages of 25 and 16. So, I learned just as much from them as they learned from me. So I think that's probably probably the way I would answer that question. I try to learn from anyone that I can. There used to be an old saying back in, I think, the 70s or 80s, whenever people were the greed is good era, or whatever that was, this idea of always be closing. I always say always be learning. So I think that's really the most important.
Oh my gosh, I just felt my spirits lift with that final comment. I think that's a beautiful way to end. Always, always, always be learning. That is certainly like the strongest quality that I have learned from fellow hackers, is that they are relentlessly curious and never satisfied, never satiated in terms of what they can know and what they can do. Timothy Summers, I think that you are a beautiful embodiment of these principles and of these qualities. I cannot thank you enough for your generosity of time, taking an hour and a half away from your family on a Friday afternoon to share and chat with us. Thank you for this delicious slide deck that you've offered us. Thank you for sharing your contact information. Folks, I would like to close out this spectacular Creators Corner session by inviting you to explore the cybersecurity room. We do have links pointing you to different places where you can find Dr. Summers' work and learn more about his mindset and the hacker mindset that he promotes and embodies so beautifully. That is it for today's Creatives Corner. I want to thank you again. Folks, say thank you by pressing Z or F or dropping a line in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us at this Creatives Corner.
Thank you again for having me, guys.